everybody, welcome back to the channel. So I just thought I'd make a little standalone video, but I guess in some ways it could be almost a little bit of a precursor to the live stream that I'm planning on doing on Sunday. So I'm recording this on Saturday afternoon. It's a nice, beautiful day outside. I'm probably going to pop outside and enjoy some of the sunshine while I can. It's not warm, but it's warmer. Hence my dropping the signature hoodie for this video. But I thought I'd talk a little bit about some of the other grading card companies kind of in the wake of PSA doing its price increases. And what actually inspired this video is not just PSA doing its price increases, but also SGC having its own little update on its website that I caught tail end of just yesterday. So they did an update on March 5th. And they wrote up a whole big letter that I got a chance to sit down and read yesterday that I got a bit of amusement out of. And then I thought I'd have a little fun doing a video and also doing a little bit of a callback. But while I'm in the process of doing that, I also thought it would be valuable or useful, like I said, as almost a bit of a primer to what I want to talk about a little bit off the top of the live stream. I can actually go through a little bit of this letter, but then also talk about some of the other companies related to it. The one I'm going to leave out right now is Beckett, just because, well, Beckett is Beckett. They're still in the same position they're in. They've got to get their own house in order as far as figuring out how to deal with those counterfeits. And in terms of taking advantage of the changes, they've already done their price increases. They announced their price increase a little while ago. And as well as that, they've got their counterfeit issue. Again, it's not like a major issue, but I already talked about how the way they reacted to it caused them some problems. So Beckett still has to get its own business in order, and they're no better versed to take advantage of PSA presumably abdicating the lower price, lower tier cards to these other things. But I'm responding to, in some ways, this letter from SGC, but also the reaction that I see in the comments on a lot of the videos, including mine, where people are talking about some of the other alternatives or saying, oh, this prices me out of the hobby. That is a separate conversation that I definitely still want to have. And I think we'll have some time to be able to do that in the live stream a little bit better. But in this venue, I want to talk about some of the other players. So like I said, I'm going to exclude Beckett from this because right now nothing has really changed for them. Their price is kind of high right now. They've got their own issues with turnaround times. They're not really in any position to take advantage of any of this or really do anything about it. I don't think anybody's running to Beckett as an answer to PSA's price increase in any way. SGC is kind of interesting because we've been kind of down this road with SGC a little bit before. So we're gonna talk about it. We're gonna go through it a little bit, but we're going to have a little fun with this one. Now, I am going to use a little bit of editing magic on this one just to cut between transitions and stuff. So what I've got on the screen for you is I've got the update from SGC, and hopefully I've made it big enough that you can read it. It's not too bad as far as I can tell. It looks decent on the preview, so you'll have to... Either way, I'm going to read you a piese of it. So the beginning of the update begins with, "Hello, remember us." And this is where I kind of want to be snarky and go, sort of, maybe. Now, the thing is, like I said, I like SGC. I think I enjoy their new labels and stuff like that. It might be a little plain for some. I enjoy the black, tuxedo design. For some of the cards, it really helps them pop. I think they've got a pretty decent service, but it's not that they're not without their own stumbling blocks, and they have made some mistakes. That's why this letter is particularly interesting in light of everything else. I find that SGC's timing, they have this miraculous ability to do this at entirely the wrong time. And I think they think this is the right time, but I question that. But I'll outline that a little bit in this letter. Let me quickly, I'm not going to read you the whole thing. I will include a link in the description for this letter if you are curious. But I want to highlight a few things for you that I think might be interesting because they include some numbers here that I thought were kind of interesting that might help put some of the other pieces in context, because I'm also going to talk a little bit about HGA as well. So we'll get to that in a second, but let's start off with SGC first. So he says, "Hello, remember us. We're the grading company you heard about a ton about not so long ago, blah, blah, blah." I don't really want to get into the whole piece. The first piece is kind of marketing copy. "We were proud of our company, proud of our 20 years of grading experience, and we weren't shy about it." Very true. And I'm going to show you a clip that highlights this point. So I want to make sure we get to that. "We spoke and you listened. It was as if a hobby light bulb, dark and pent up for 20 years. I want to know exactly who decided to sit down and write this. It's very dramatic. It's very dramatic. We should read it with some music or something. "It's finally been illuminated, bolder, brighter than ever before. The card community was finally ready to put not just some of its faith behind SGC, but all of it, and then some." This is just downright inspirational is what this is right here. This is inspiring. "In the blink of an eye, our 12-man team was absolutely overrun. Over just a 7-day period, our intake had increased 20 times what it had previously been. We're not only understaffed by about 70 or so employees, we also lack the necessary policies, procedures, and infrastructure critical to effectively accommodate the new explosion of demand." Now, this is true. This is kind of what played out. Totally agree with that. But I've got a major issue with this piece, and this is what makes me kind of laugh about this. And this is why I say SGC has this capacity with their enthusiasm to shoot themselves not only in the foot, in the full leg, in the side, in the arm, through the heart, and possibly in the face. And it's remarkable. This is a wonderful admission. It's disclosure. It's all that wonderful thing that you talk about that you want to hear from people, which is great. But it was not inconceivable, and it was not without being foreseen. And this is where I want to kind of show you something here in a second. We're going to use a little editing magic, and I'm going to go to a clip from a YouTube video. I'll cite it and talk about it and everything, and we'll get into the context of that. I'll be right back with that. All right, a little bit of editing magic later. We're back with a clip from Cardboard Chronicles. So Josh from Cardboard Chronicles and Card Ladder fame that you may be familiar with. I've had him on the channel before, along with Chris, from Card Ladder as well. He did an interview back on May the 1st of 2020, and I'll try to include a link to this as well if you want to listen to the whole thing. This was during the initial marketing blitz when SGC kind of outwardly announced itself to the world that they were ready to take on. Remember, this is May 2020. March really is where things started to ramp up as far as COVID is concerned. You started to see some of the, explosion in the card market. These were the early days of the card market. Now, obviously, times have changed. Peter here, shown here, who is at the bottom of the, I believe it's the same Peter as the letter, because signing off the same person. I have to double check the name, but I believe it is the same Peter. But the point is that he came in as an ambassador of SGC to explain to everybody why they were different, why they were ready to take on the mantle and become, and he spoke with great passion about, SGC and what they were going to do and all that great stuff. And it sounded great at the time. But I kind of listened to it with a little bit of a dubious ear because I'm sitting there like it's sunshine and rainbows and there's a lot of complications to it. It's not that PSA didn't want to be able to accomplish what they were going to do because going through that backlog makes them money. They make money when they process cards. Having a backlog has some utility, but having a ridiculously and ever-growing backlog is not really super useful. It's helpful to a point, but there's a limit. There's a threshold you cross at which having a backlog becomes a liability rather than an asset. That's the fine line you have to kind of cross. But Peter came in. He came in guns blazing. But this particular clip is part of the reason why I found that part of the letter kind of funny. So it's one of those things. It could have been foreseen a little bit. And Josh actually asks an excellent question in this clip. But I'm giving you the end of Peter's answer to one of the questions and then Josh's question, which then leads to Peter's answer. So let's kind of check it out. Let's check it out together.
Here to hopefully lapse them at some point because we're not thinking small here. We're thinking big. And we're going to need everyone to do it. And we hope that this is a movement that continues and the momentum only grows.
I have a question about the turnaround times. That's obviously the hottest topic, I think, and probably the biggest benefit that you guys provide. As in comparison to the other companies, what happens when you guys start growing though? Are you going to be able to take on the new volume? Like, let's say you 10x, right? In a couple months or a year or whatever. Are you going to hire more? Like, how do you?
This is in literary terms called foreshadowing. And Josh, 10x. Come on, man. That's lightweight work. 20x. But anyway, let's get his answer.
How does the hiring go? How do you grow? How do you expand this? Because I feel like from PSA especially, we just kind of hear this like, oh, we can't hire more. We're just kind of stuck with this backlog. How are you guys going to address that?
Well, I can tell you that makes no sense. We can't hire more. I don't know what that means. I don't know if there's a law in the state of California that said that you can't hire a certain amount of employees, but I wouldn't think there is. So you can't hire more. I can tell you right now, just to give some insight into what's going on in the SGC world behind the scenes. So obviously, like I mentioned, we have a lot of business. And what we want to do is bring in a group of 5 employees at once, 10 employees at once, and just start cranking these guys into our, put them in the model to make them just perfect SGC employees. What's made that very difficult is that like all companies, we have a space and that space is limited. And with what's going on these days, I can't put 2 guys shoulder to shoulder working on an order at the same time. So what do? We can basically sit back and we can say, well, it is what it is. And we're facing challenges and, they'll understand, what are they going to do? Wait, 2 years with the other guys, they'll keep sending. Again, man, we're not comfortable. So what we're doing, I literally checked out a new space yesterday. I am awaiting an email back on what that space will cost me. And I can tell you that we are very eager to get into a new space because once we get into a new space, all of a sudden our people are spread out. And all of a sudden I can start hiring literally 4 or 5 people a day, if that's what it's going to take. And right now, to be totally honest with you, it looks like we're headed in that direction.
May 2020, when we were all naive and we thought things were very different. Now, here's the thing. There's nothing wrong with what he said. I think the idea of wanting to have the infrastructure, having the additional space, the COVID restriction was that not being able to have a lot of people in a proximate space. It's the same issue that ComC has. It's the same issue that PSA had. That's why they had to buy that larger facility prior to the sale and all that business related to all that. That was an economic reality for a lot of different things. However, and I'm no MBA, I'm no business expert, but I'm someone with reasonable common sense. And it seems to me, understanding that infrastructure was going to be something you were going to need if the amount of capacity that you needed suddenly ramped up, you would need to probably have those things in place first, or at least some of those capacities in place first before you went out and said, we're ready for you. Come and hit us with your best shot effectively, is what he did. Is he challenged the hobby to hit him with the best shot. And they did. And the thing is, in the letter, like, it's addressed here, but it's like, and you could say, oh, well, he couldn't have foreseen that. It's like, well, everything was kind of exploding at the time. You needed to understand. This is where you don't need to do deep market analysis to realize, okay, this thing's upticking. With the amount of people we have right now, what level of capacity are we at? Are we at 70% capacity right now? Like, we got a little bit of room that we can go more. Are we at 80% capacity? Are we at 50% capacity? Are we at 110% capacity? We literally can't take on any more volume without getting crushed. You have to do that evaluation and be honest with yourself and tell yourself the truth. Can you handle more, or are you just being ambitious? It seemed like there was more ambition than business, than business evaluation being done there. And unfortunately, that was to their detriment, and they paid the price. And they reference it here in the letter. In the blink of an eye, our 12-man team was absolutely overrun. Well, if your 12-man team was absolutely overrun, you didn't need a 12-man team. You needed a 20, 30, 40, 50-man team. And in here, you say, we were not only understaffed by about 70 or so employees, so then why were you out there telling people you're ready to go? You needed to maybe hire. You didn't need to hire all 70. But maybe you need to hire 20 or 30 so that you at least had a little buffer before you fully got crushed. So now you're understaffed at this stage in the story. So we also lack the necessary policies, procedures, and infrastructure critical to effectively accommodate the new explosion of demand. Hold on a second. Full stop. Needle drop. Needle scratch. That's what I was looking for. Needle scratch. Okay, the amount of employees that you're missing, that's a logistical problem. You ran into that space issue. Maybe you weren't, I don't know what happened with that situation that he referenced, this building that he was looking at getting into. Maybe they weren't able to get it in time, or something else happened and it prevented them from being able to get the people they wanted to get into. That's fine. That's fair. We lack the necessary policies, procedure, and infrastructure. That's a management failing. Policies, procedures, and infrastructure do not depend on new employees. That's you having the process in place going, all right, guys, so if we scale up a lot, this is what we're going to have to do. This is how we're going to have to adapt and change our way of doing things to make sure each one of you can handle a little bit more volume to give us at least a shot, give us a little bit of a buffer. That is a management failing. Now, again, we're relitigating something from a year ago, but the point is that this letter is acknowledging that they came into it without having done their full due diligence, and they weren't ready, and they paid the price for it. The rest that will continue from the story from here. The task at hand was significant, at times overwhelming. It's difficult choosing where to begin. Hiring was an absolute necessity. Rapid expansion of space was a must, and our standard operating procedure that worked for 22 years was now completely obsolete. The latter portion of that should have been something you knew before you started doing a little bit of advertising for your thing to try to court new business. But anyway, whatever. On top of that, with 20 times the amount of cards at SGC, we needed 20 times the amount of supplies. Again, something you needed to prepare for prior to telling people that you were ready to go. But, again, we're relitigating from May of 2020. As each day passed, the orders of facility inched closer and closer to the deadline we told all our supporters we'd count on. Before we knew it, we were running behind schedule, and SGC experienced its first ever backlog. You had to consider that possibility. You needed to do your evaluation a little better. Meanwhile, the cards kept pouring in, blah, blah, blah. Let me go here. I realized that I should have come out and addressed the community much sooner than I did. This was a transparency thing, and Josh talked about transparency a little later on. He's saying that was an area where they didn't need necessarily to improve upon. I found that amusing. Just thought I would throw that in there. But whatever, fine. If I could do it all over again, I would detail every challenge we face, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. Shortly into the surge, we realized we have very big decisions to make. So a lot of it is just kind of in the spirit of quote unquote transparency, kind of patting themselves on the back, so staying true to their values, blah, 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 whatever. Okay. So I'm scanning through quickly. I want to get to this piece because it's a little bit more interesting. While the team grew larger and larger, we kept close track of the amount of cars we shipped every day. We set lofty goals for ourselves, constantly looking to improve on the numbers from the days and weeks prior. And the reason why I say this piece is interesting is because this is going to play into the HGA part as well. Only 3 to 4 months after having a daily output of 200 to 250 cards, which was their daily output prior to the surge, By the way, that's a very low number. And if you were courting additional business, even if it doubled or tripled, that doesn't seem good to me, but just something I threw out there. That number increased to 1,200. Better, but still problematic considering the amount of increase that you talked about there. From there, output hit 2,000. Only a short time and a few key hires later, 2,500. Then the goal became 3,000. The investment in ourselves was paying off, and it became clear the SGC model of scaling was the best in the business. Now, to be clear, they increased their daily output from 200 to 300 cards to a goal of 3,000, which is about 10 times. Their volumes went up 20 times. But anyway, moving on. Finally, turnaround times were stabilized, and our output matched the inflow of cards. There was an amazing accomplishment. However, the stabilization took place about 5 months too late, and the backlog remained around 16 weeks. Growing large enough to keep up was hard enough, blah, blah, blah. Turnaround time for 4 or 5 months is far from changing the game. Keep going. I want to scan through. Yeah, patting themselves on the back some more. Here. As the catch-up phase began, we decided to allocate money where we still had intangible upgrades. We made substantial investments. We were hoping to reveal around the time we announced that we were finally caught up. Well, that time is now. Congratulations. Almost a year after that posting. Because now we're in March of 2021 and we're talking about May. So it's not a full year, maybe 10 months, give or take. So the backlog is gone. Congratulations. Good on you. I am honored to share with you we've delivered. The SGC backlog is completely non-existent. It is never coming back. Never make promises like that. Just throwing that out there, Peter. Don't make promises like that unless you're really sure you can keep them. But fine, you do you. I think it's cute here. I'm going to have some fun with this. We're going to speak to you directly via an SGC podcast. That's great. That's fine. Okay, so here we go. So here's where they announced that they've made a price increase. In order to continue to provide you with the press service you deserve, SGC has literally no choice but to raise our prices from a base rate of $15 a card to $25 a card. Yep. And then he tries to justify it here a little bit and talks about the different things you're going to do here. This means let me read this piece though. With more people aware of our current turnaround time, our submissions have substantially increased. Our inflow has skyrocketed, although we're now built to handle it almost a year after the original concept here. An exponential increase after this announcement is received would mean that everything we've worked so hard to achieve would be jeopardized. Well, at least you're acknowledging the possibility that by saying this, you may be courting the same issue you encountered before, which is good. That acknowledgement is important. We refuse to let history repeat itself, and we will not take in more cards than we can handle. That means that if our capacity is exceeded in the first few days after this announcement is released, we will be forced to raise our prices once again to bring the inflow back to a manageable level. So there may be another increase after this one. Having said that, our capacity building is far from over, and we're working day and night to avoid a situation where the price is constantly increasing. Just yesterday, we received the keys, so this is almost a year later, to an additional 5,200 square feet of workspace, putting us at nearly 20,000 total square feet so far. Our goal is to surpass a daily output of 6,000 cards per day by year's end. This is important, 6,000 cards per day. So that's the key number that I wanted to touch on as well. That's why I wanted to do it. So the rest of it, blah, blah, blah. From my heart, sincerely, thank you. Peter Steinberg, President, SGC. Great. I'm not here to cheerlead, and I'm not here to read on all the marketing copy they have on there. The numbers, though, were interesting. That's why I wanted to bring them to you. And like I said, I will include a link in the description for this. If you want to read it yourself, by all means, feel free. And then get your SGC pom-poms after. It's very inspirational. I think this is like the Sparta speech or, for the Patriot. The interesting part about that is some of the numbers they said. And one of the key pieces that I caught on there as well is that our goal is to surpass a daily output of 6,000 cards per day by year's end. Now, for the sake of argument, let's say we'll call it 5 business days. They might be working a 6 day or 7, or they might work all 7 days. I don't know. But let's say 5 days for the simplicity of math. So if they achieve their goal, they're saying they can turn around 30,000 cards a day. 30,000 cards a week for 5 business days. So 6,000 cards a day, 30,000 cards per week. That's pretty good. Very solid, especially in comparison to the earlier reference where they said they were doing 200 to 250 cards a day. That's a substantial increase, without question, without a doubt. But all that means is they've gotten successful is that their objective is to get to a point where they can handle about a 20 times surge, give or take, compared to where they were originally. And on the low end, if you take the 200, they're saying about 30x. Well, last time around, they went up about 20x in, a couple of weeks. So that is based on the old model. Things have not gotten less hot in the market. And now with PSA increasing its prices, that may drive additional business that may be available to you. Are they in a position to scale up to get to that point? Maybe, maybe not. But the point is that they've acknowledged now that they may require, if they encounter that surge again, they may have to additionally increase their prices as an acknowledgement of we can't take on more than we can handle, which is good. You left yourself open though, and you gave yourself an out from that regard. But basically you said in effect that additional price increases could come. So this price might be temporary. We'll see what happens depending on volumes. So if we take SGC's aspirational total of 6,000 cards per day, we average that out to about 30,000 cards per week. This is the aspirational. Let's say I bump it up to that number. Then I take PSA's backlog. I'm going to make up a number that's actually lower than what I believe. Let's say a 3 million card backlog. Let's say I get SGC to do a new job. Their job is just to clear PSA's backlog of 3 million cards, which by the way is lower than what I believe PSA's backlog is. At 30,000 cards per week, if I'm averaging it out, again, they might work additional days. Let's just stick to 30,000. Okay. At 30,000, it would take them 100 weeks to clear a 3 million card backlog. 100 weeks of working consistently at 6,000 cards per day, 30,000 cards per week, doing nothing else, taking no additional orders, and simply doing PSA's backlog, which, by the way, that number is lower than reality. That backlog could be 5 million cards. It could be 10 million cards. I don't know. But I locked it down to 3 million just to make the numbers palatable. And I bumped up SGC's capacity to what they're aspiring for by year's end. I gave it to them today, and it still took them 100 weeks to meet that. 30,000 cards a week, 10 times that, 10 weeks, that's 300,000 cards, times 10 again. Well, now we're at 3 million. That's 100 weeks. That's almost 2 years just to catch up the backlog. And that's if they get to their aspirational total, which they very well could if they hire enough. That tells you the kind of numbers, the volume we're talking about here. We're talking bulk submitters, people sending in a bunch of base cards and all that. That's why I kind of laugh when I say, like, I see the comments. It's like, oh, I'm going to run to this out of the other company. It's like, okay, you're going to run to Beckett, who's backed up. You're going to run to SGC, who had their struggles meeting the capacity last time around and now are making some promises again. And we'll see if they're managed to do that. They may be able to absorb some of the volume, I have no doubt, but they're going to have some struggles. What about HGA, right? That's the next one. That's the one that some folks are having some fun with. HGA will save us. Okay, well, let's take a look at that one for a moment here. What I'm going to show you now is I'm going to show you a Facebook post from HGA, and a recent one, not from a long time ago. Let's do a HGA post from about 15 hours ago at the time I'm recording this. Okay, so let me grab that tab here for you. Okay. So this is on their Facebook, and you can certainly check it out yourself if you wish. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger if I can. There we go. So this is a hybrid grading approach over here on the side. I wish I could minimize this part, but anyway. So they say new update 15 hours ago. So after much consideration, we're going to decrease our cards per order from 20 to 5. The idea being here that they want to make sure that more people are able to take advantage of the services, because what they've been finding is because they have a definitive cap on the amount of orders they'll take, or the amount of cards they'll take in for orders, that they're running into an issue where as soon as the queues open up for the week, the slots get taken up immediately. So a lot of folks are trying to submit cards to them, but they're just not able to get through. It basically creates an issue to the point that there have been bots that have been made to try to take those slots. So they're decreasing the amount per order from 20 to 5 in order to allow more people potentially to be able to use their services. So they're already having a capacity issue, but they're capping it in order to allow themselves to keep and maintain the turnaround times, which is great. That's fine. But that means they're in no position to really absorb the volume. Remember remember those numbers I gave you earlier. Let's pretend SGC today is able to do 6,000 cards per day, which is what they said they aspire to do. We're going to read another number here in a second. That's why I like the SGC one, because it gave us some numbers to play around with. Okay, we'll get to that in a second here. So, however, our goal is to provide new service to all collectors and feel like we can do that in the current situation to limit the cards per order. Yep. Many people are trying over and over again to no avail. We want everyone to have the opportunity. That's created some frustration for folks, for sure. This resulted in about 2 to 3 times as many customers getting to place submissions each week. Fine. Starting Thursday, all orders that are over 5 will not be accepted. So please work on prioritizing which cards you'd like to send to us. So if you can only send 5 cards, you're going to be a lot pickier. That's not really going to resolve your issue for bulk submitters and stuff like that. That's not going to be a drop in the bucket. But here's the interesting thing. We are continuing to train and hire, and we're on a fast pace to reach 10,000 cards. This would be on a weekly cap basis. 10,000 cards in about 12 weeks. We wish it could be sooner, and if it can be, then it will. Thanks for giving us a chance to be part of HGA family, blah, 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 usual spiel. Okay. That means HGA, your savior, HGA, is hoping in 12 weeks, that's 3 months from now, to be able to handle 10,000. They're having to limit the amount of cards per order to 5 to actually try to spread the wealth a little bit so people can get their orders in. So it's not just a handful of groups. So it's a greater group of people trying out their service. I have no horse in this race. I hope HGA does well. Their holders look nice. I haven't had one in hand, so I have to see what it looks like. but they're in no position to eat up any volume. SGC probably isn't in a position to eat up any volume yet. They're not at that 6,000 cards per day yet. But even if they are, that's a drop in the bucket. HGA can't even handle that. If it's 10,000 per week, I think it's 10,000 per week because I think it's a weekly cap. So if it's 10,000 per week, that means in a week, they're barely able to handle what SGC aspires to have by the end of the year in less than 2 days. In 2 days, they would be 12,000 cards. HGA is looking in 3 months at maybe being 10,000 per week. That's not going to get it done. That's not going to be a drop in the bucket. And again, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with HGA. You want to do get HGA and you can get in and submit some cards? Cool, do it. You want to submit some cards to SGC? Great. Okay, so that leaves us with the other player, CSG. They're a complete wild card. We don't know what capacity they have or don't have. We don't know, they've had some time now to build their infrastructure and try to establish some kind of a presence to be able to say, okay, because now they've opened the doors, we don't know yet what it looks like as far as taking those orders. We don't know what it looks like as far as early returns on turnaround times. We don't know what it looks like as far as the secondary market because it's still too soon. I think it'll be maybe a couple of weeks to a couple of months before we really start getting a sense. If they start getting slammed and they run into a problem, they may not be able to absorb the capacity. And all of a sudden we find ourselves back to what I said before. Okay, PSA kind of abdicated that space, and yet there was nobody in a position to really take it. SGC may or may not be in a position to take it. I don't think they are. CSG may or may not be in a position to take it. I don't know enough about what's going on in the background there. They're kind of a mystery right now. HGA is definitely not going to take it, only because they don't have the capacity. They're working their way to build up to it, but it takes time to build up to it. They're still so new. So putting all the weight on them is just unfair. So I'm not going to put that on them. It's not reasonable. So if SGC can't handle it, CSG maybe not can handle some of it, and HGA isn't going to take the pressure off. Who's your low end grading thing? Is it GMA? Really? No. I live in Canada. KSA? Seriously? No. MNT? No. Any other generic third-party grader that you can make up right now? A bunch of acronyms you want to throw in? An alphabet soup? No. Now, with all that said, I want to make something abundantly clear. The reality is this. A lot of what I hear, and we'll talk about it more on the live stream tomorrow, but a lot of what I hear really is complaining from folks that don't seem to... I don't want to say don't seem to understand because that seems condescending, and I don't mind being condescending, but for this one, I'm not going to be. I'm going to try to be fair about this and be light on it. The reality is, though, that there is still a disconnect where collectors still believe, for some reason, that companies in the hobby operate altruistically. They're not doing it because they want you to be their friends. They don't mind if you're their friends because then you have customer loyalty and all that is great stuff for business. But they are a business. The goal is to make money. And the goal is to be able to handle whatever you're going to handle. PSA strategically chose to raise the prices because they understood that they could. They looked at the supply and demand curve and they said, look, right now, compared to where the amount of volume we're getting is saying our prices is too low. We're getting way too many submissions here because if we're getting these many submissions for base cards and random junk, well, then our prices are too low. We need to bump that up. We need to get it to a level where, yeah, we still get a lot of submissions. Yeah, we still make a lot of money on those submissions, but at least it's at a level where like, look, I'm not going to hire 500 more graders. It's not going to happen. That's just a no-go. Why? Because, and Chris from House of Jordans and Card Ladder has said this before, like betting against the hobby. Well, I don't think they're betting against the hobby, but they're looking at the current state and saying to themselves, is this particular size of market sustainable in terms of sheer number of volume? Is that sustainable? If the answer is yes, well, then you got to keep hiring and keep doing that. But if the answer is yes for now, maybe yes for 6 months from now, maybe yes from 12 months from now, but in 18 months, are you still going to get the same influx of submission? Are you going to get even more? If the answer is yes, well, then you got to keep hiring and hiring and hiring. If the answer is no, you are better off raising the rates because then you don't have to hire more people because then if the volume eventually slows down, you can always adjust prices. I doubt you will, but you could. But if the volume drops off, even after you adjust the prices, it doesn't quite fix the situation and you have to lay off a bunch of people. You've got all these graders potentially out there that could have been useful to you. You're not going to overhire is basically what I'm getting at. There isn't much incentive to do it. So it's one of those things where you're trying to balance out. We need enough people to be able to handle the volume during a more realistic market. We still want to have that so we don't have a backlog during more conventional times. If the market is hotter, the market is hotter. But right now we've got the market hotter plus COVID plus a bunch of other things going on. This might be a perfect storm. We don't want to plan for the perfect storm. We want to plan for if the market's bigger, a little bit bigger or reasonably bigger, we want to plan for that. Because if the market goes down a little bit, then we still got the appropriate amount of graders for the appropriate amount of service. And the only difference is that the backlog shrinks and turnaround times improve. And then in reality, the customer service improves, even though the cost per card goes up. And the other thing I'll say really quickly here at the tail end is your level of complaint on this will depend on what type of individual you are submitting. If you're a flipper, I have no sympathy for you because this is just added to the cost of doing business. This is part of it. You need to do a cost benefit analysis. Is it worth it for you to pay X to send the card in, where if it gets the grade you're looking for, it gets Y? If the answer is yes, you're still going to submit, grit your teeth, grumble, and deal with it. I don't feel bad for you. If you're a collector though, and you want it for your collection, I sympathize. I'm a lot more sympathetic to that. But I would point out to you that as a collector, it's basically a fancy holder. So really what you should be coming to terms with is the price worth it to have it in a fancy holder? I've got cards in my collection that aren't going to grade out well, but they're PC cards, but I would still like to have them in the holder and I may still send them. This is not going to deter me, but the amount of cards that I'm going to send in is going to be relatively small. So I factor that in. If it's worth it for me for the fancy holder, then great. If not, go get a one touch, go get a screw down, go get a variety of other holders, go get a nice top loader. You have to understand what it is you're doing this for. Because if you're doing it for a PC situation, yes, these prices are unreasonable. Totally with you. But you don't need to get it graded though if it's a PC piece. You really don't. If you're reselling, it helps a lot. I'm a little more understanding of where that eats into your profit margins and that really disturbs you. I understand. But just understand that these other grading companies might not be in a position to help you. And their prices might go in a little bit more in line as time goes on. HGA is fighting the pricing, but they're doing it by introducing the cap. They're intentionally restricting the amount of capacity they can handle in order to maintain their price point and maintain their turnaround times. But that means they're not going to be able to absorb the volume. They're not going to be able to help you fix this problem if that's what you were looking for. You might have to go to third or fourth tier grading services then, where the resale value might not be there. So it might not be something you can fix with that way. So I don't know if BSA really did anything problematic for them if you look at the rest of the field, which is kind of what this video wanted to do. I wanted to show you a little bit of the rest of the field and kind of give you a little bit of context about, I don't think these other ones are going to fix your problem necessarily. I'm not telling you who to send to whoever you want, but I'm just saying, factor in, take in all the factors, consider all the realities, and pay attention to stuff like this. SGC basically admitted what we already knew. If they get slammed again, they're going to raise prices. HGA admitted what we already knew. Their capacity is growing slowly. They have aspirations. They would like to make this happen for you guys, but it's going to take time. They're not ready. And CSG, we don't know what they are. They're the wild card. And then Beckett right now is just kind of floating in the wilderness and everybody's just sitting back going like, well, what are you guys going to do? Radio silence. We'll find out what, if anything, they're going to do about it as well. Maybe another player will come in. Maybe they won't. But that's kind of the third-party grading market as it stands today. A little bit complicated, without a doubt. But anyway, so that's it for this video. Like I said, we're going to talk a little bit more about it, I think, on Sunday. We'll have a little bit of discussion about it, at least at the beginning, in the first segment. And then if people want to keep talking about it, we certainly can. So if this is the first video you've seen of mine, welcome. This is Because I'm Carlos YouTube channel. We talk about sports cards pretty regularly. A lot of it is kind of deep dive and stuff like this. We have a little bit of fun. We do live streams once a week. And if you enjoy some of this content, then hit the like button because it helps the algorithm. And if you've never been here before, subscribe. So do that. Anyway, we'll talk a little bit more about it, like I said, in the coming, at the end of the week here and then in the coming weeks. And then we'll kind of see what happens from there. Hopefully this is a little bit helpful. Any comments or questions you have are always welcome.